With the upcoming presidential election this November, C-SPAN is once again providing middle and high school students across the country with a platform to tell us about the issues that are important to them and their generation. Our 21st annual Student Cam documentary competition is now open to submissions and will award $100,000 in cash prizes to the top 150 videos. For more information, visit studentcam.org.
On About Books, we delve into the latest news about the publishing industry with interesting insider interviews with publishing industry experts. We'll also give you updates on current nonfiction authors and books, the latest book reviews, and we'll talk about the current nonfiction books featured on C-SPAN's Book TV.
And welcome to About Books. This week, it's a fall book preview to let you know about some of the new books that are being published. But first, here's some of the latest news from the publishing world. Well, the finalists for the 75th Annual National Book Awards were recently announced. The annual awards were established in 1950. They celebrate the best in American writing. They're administered by the National Book Foundation. Publishers submitted a total of 671 books for the 2024 award for nonfiction alone. This year's 10 finalists for nonfiction include There's Always This Year by cultural critic and poet Hanif Abdurraqib. He discusses in his new book, Basketball and Life, in his hometown of Columbus, Ohio. In Our Moon, science writer Rebecca Boyle looks at the role of the moon in shaping the Earth and human evolution. Another book that made the National Book Award nonfiction finals, anthropology professor Jason DeLeon's Look at Smugglers, who bring migrants across borders. The book is entitled Soldiers and Kings. And Pulitzer Prize winner Eliza Griswold looks at the history and eventual closure of a progressive church in Circle of Hope. In Unshrinking, philosopher Kate Mann looks at fat phobia and its impact on our health. And also on the National Book Awards nonfiction finals list is author Salman Rushdie's Knife. It recounts the 2022 stabbing attack that nearly took his life. Reuters senior correspondent Ernest Scheider is the author of The War Below. The book is about the global battle to obtain minerals required to power 21st century technology. In A Great Disorder, historian Richard Slotkin looks at myths in American history that have led to division in America. And Deborah Taffa recalls growing up as a Native American in the 80s in her memoir, Whiskey Tender. And finally, on the National Book Awards nonfiction finals list, Vanessa Villarreal's essays in Magical/Realism. It's a look at how the fictional works of sci-fi and fantasy reflect our own reality. This year's National Book Awards winners will be announced November 20th in New York. Book TV will be covering that event. And now a look at some of the most anticipated books coming out this fall. Already, several high-profile memoirs have been released. They include Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson's Lovely One, former First Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton's Something Lost, Something Gained, Reflections on Life, Love, and Liberty. And another First Lady has a memoir as well. In Melania Trump offers a window on her Slovenian childhood, career in fashion, courtship with Donald Trump, and time in the White House. Here's part of her promotional video.
Writing this memoir has been a deeply personal and reflective journey for me. As a private person who has often been the subject of public scrutiny and misrepresentation, I feel a responsibility to clarify the facts. I believe it is important to share my perspective, the truth.
And along with Melania, 2 other books coming out this fall that focus on the Trumps and Donald Trump specifically. Journalist and presidential historian Jonathan Alter will release his account of the 23-day hush money trial of Donald Trump. The book is titled American Reckoning: Inside Trump's Trial and My Own. Dinesh D'Souza takes a look at the passions that former President Trump stirs on the left and right. His book is titled Vindicating Trump, and he's planning to turn it into a movie. President Joe Biden is also the subject of a book this fall from former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani. The Biden crime family, the blueprint for their prosecution, will be released in late November. Mr. Giuliani says that his book will make the case that President Biden and his son Hunter have engaged in corrupt business practices from Ukraine to China. The book's foreword, written by former White House chief strategist Steve Bannon. And speaking of Steve Bannon, best-selling author Jim Proser will release Bannon, American Street Fighter. The book discusses Mr. Bannon's rise in conservative media, his work in the Trump White House, and his federal contempt of Congress conviction. That conviction led to a 4-month jail sentence, which Mr. Bannon is currently serving at a federal prison in Connecticut. Presidential history is also popular this fall. Former 9-term California Republican Congressman Chris Cox takes a critical look at the 28th president in Woodrow Wilson, The Light Withdrawn. Publisher Simon & Schuster says the Wilson that emerges in the book is, quote, a man superbly unsuited to the moment when he ascended to the presidency in 1912. And presidential biographer Nigel Hamilton looks at Abraham Lincoln and Jefferson Davis through their roles as commanders-in-chief of the Union and Confederate armies. Mr. Hamilton's book is titled Lincoln versus Davis, The War of the Presidents. And another book coming out this fall, historian Mary Grabar looks at myths surrounding the 32nd president. It's titled Debunking FDR. Ms. Grabar previously wrote Debunking Howard Zinn and Debunking the 1619 Project. Publisher Regnery History notes that, quote, Debunking FDR offers cautionary reminders to the FDR-admiring left and a growing segment of the right. FDR's influence lives on in crony capitalism, government-dependent populations, and a mammoth administrative state. Franklin Roosevelt is also a main focus of a new book by best-selling historian H.W. Brands. The book looks at the debate over America's role in the world in the run-up to World War II, as personified in President Roosevelt and isolationist and aviator Charles Lindbergh. The book is called America First, Roosevelt versus Lindbergh in the Shadow of War. Well, the phrase America First is in the title of another book coming out this fall. Entrepreneur and former presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy offers his plan for the Republican Party. His new book is entitled Truce, The Future of America First. Rutgers University history and journalism professor David Greenberg wrote a 700-page biography of the late civil rights icon and Georgia Congressman John Lewis. It's titled John Lewis, A Life, and draws on interviews with the late congressman and activist, along with approximately 275 others who knew or worked with him. The publisher is Simon & Schuster. They say that the book, quote, is the definitive biography of a man whose heroism during the civil rights movement helped to bring America a new birth of freedom. Also this fall, Malcolm Gladwell will publish a sequel to his 2000 bestseller, The Tipping Point. As with the original, Revenge of the Tipping Point seeks to understand a variety of social phenomenon and social epidemics. Topics include why in the late 1980s and early 90s, Los Angeles became the bank robbery capital of the world, and what big cats and clusters of teen suicide have in common. And best-selling author John Grisham returns to nonfiction for the first time in more than a decade. Mr. Grisham teamed up with Jim McCloskey for Framed, Astonishing True Stories of Wrongful Convictions. The book includes the stories of Americans who were innocent but found guilty and spent years in prison while fighting for exoneration. And finally, author Stephanie Gorton looks at the dawn of the modern birth control movement in the 1910s. She looks into the personal and political rivalry between Planned Parenthood founder Margaret Sanger and women's rights activist Mary Ware Dennett. The book is called The Icon and the Idealist. And that's a look at some of the books coming out this fall. We should note that many of these books will be featured on Book TV in the coming weeks, and that all are now available in bookstores or online. And now a conversation with Associated Press books and publishing reporter Hillel Italie about the nonfiction books he's looking forward to in the coming months. So, Mr. Italie, we looked at some of the political books that are coming out this fall. What are some that caught your attention?
I think the one that probably everyone is expecting the most is the Bob Woodward book, War. Bob Woodward books are a kind of an election tradition. Every presidential election for a long time, he'll put out a book that almost always makes a lot of news. This one is especially notable because there's almost nothing coming out about Kamala Harris. One of the consequences of Biden dropping out and Kamala Harris now being the nominee is the publishing industry didn't really have anything ready. There are no big Kamala Harris tell-alls or anything like that. So what you have in the Woodward book is it's about the Ukraine war, it's about the war in the Middle East, and about how the Biden administration has been handling it, and also how Trump has been reacting. And apparently Woodward, the change with Biden and Harris happened while Woodward was still working on this book. So the understanding is that over these past few weeks, he's trying to get more of Kamala Harris into the book. So that may be the book of the fall that sort of has the most to say about her as vice president. Other than that, there are a range of books. You have books from both Hillary Clinton, one that just came out. You've got a memoir from Bill Clinton about his post-presidential years. You have a memoir from Melania Trump, which is noteworthy because she almost never talks to the press. Very little is known about her opinions on anything. So she has a memoir coming out soon. Mary Trump, who is Donald Trump's, you could say, estranged niece, has another book out, sort of about the family and kind of the unhappy relationship there. One of the consequences, again, of Biden's dropping out is you've got books that were clearly meant to be published with Biden as a candidate. For instance, you've got a book called The Biden Crime Family, which, as you can imagine, is an anti-Biden book that the former mayor of New York, Rudolph Giuliani, worked on. That book is still coming out. Obviously, it was a book that, they were expecting him still to be the candidate. And there's another one like that called The Big Guy by Miranda Devine. And it's kind of about Biden and Hunter Biden. And again, a book that, was clearly conceived when everyone thought that Joe Biden would be the candidate. So it's an unusual election year because of this change over the summer.
Well, another book that's coming out this fall, which just came onto the radar, was Christopher Steele's Unredacted, talking about the 2016 Russiagate.
Yes, that has just recently been announced. It's coming out in a couple of weeks. Christopher Steele, of course, is known for people who follow these things for the Steele dossier, which had all kinds of unflattering things to say about Trump. There is an enormous amount of debate over, how accurate that dossier was. I mean, it was, kind of an unredacted, as this book is called. It's kind of raw intelligence. So this one is apparently, again, it's about Trump. It's about Trump and Russia and whatever connections they might have. And so, yes, often in election years, you get last-minute drop-ins. Somebody is trying to get something that's, really timely, and hopefully will make some very kind of fresh news. And this is one of those books, that we'll see. Trump's relationship with Russia has been obviously debated enormously for years, and we'll just have to see if this adds anything to that.
Hillel Italie, in a recent article that you wrote about the fall upcoming books, you wrote that Project 2025 architect Kevin Roberts' Dawn's Early Light, which J.D. Vance wrote the foreword for, has been postponed now until after the election.
Right. Again, a very unusual situation. You have this Project 2025, a very high profile kind of list of policies put together by, what's it, is it the Heritage Foundation?
Yes.
And, there are all kinds of ties in there. People who have worked for Trump who worked on this. The Trump campaign has done everything to distance itself from it. And part of that is here you have this book, with J.D. Vance contributed to, that they're pushing it back because obviously there's concern, it could make the kind of news that the campaign doesn't really want. So an unusual situation there where a policy book essentially gets pushed back until after the election.
Ta-Nehisi Coates, does his name on a book mean instant bestseller?
That's a hard one to say. He's obviously, a very highly regarded writer. Between the World and Me is it may be too soon to call it a classic, but it's certainly become, you could almost say, standard reading for a lot of people. I don't know if it guarantees bestseller, but it guarantees attention. Anything he writes is taken seriously. And this one, he had written a novel. His previous book had been a novel, and now he's back into nonfiction, which is really where he made his name as a journalist. And so, he has spent some time in the Middle East and in this country. And it always, again, no one can predict how well it will sell, but it will certainly get a lot of attention, close attention.
And the name of Ta-Nehisi Coates' new book is The Message.
Yes.
Mr. Italie, there's a posthumous memoir coming out from Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny.
Correct. Yes. This was apparently worked on while he was in prison. I guess he was far along enough on the book that they felt it could be published. This happens often, not usually under the circumstances that it happened with him, but these things happen, that a book somebody is working on that they don't live to see, and it becomes a decision of what to do with it. And the feeling, I think, is that what he had to say was, the book was far enough along, and that what he had to say was important enough that they felt, it should be published.
Mr. Italie, you've been around the block here and through a couple of election cycles as the book and publishing reporter for AP. Do political books increase in election years?
They do. I mean, understandably. Now, one of the things that's happened when Trump was president, the sales of political books and interest of political books just went through the roof. People just wanted to read everything they could about him. As soon as, he left office and Biden took over, they really fell off for a couple of reasons. One is you do reach a saturation point, and I think there became a point where people felt, okay, we've read everything we're going to read about Trump. And there has never been among readers and in the book publishing world a great deal of interest in Biden and in Biden's story. Biden just doesn't move books for the publishing industry. So while there are more political books in an election year, than in an off year, in general, it's not like what it was, 4 years ago when Trump was in office. Not quite the same intensity. And plus the added factor, again, of this last minute change in candidates. Very unusual situation where, you have the Democratic candidate for president, and there's almost nothing there new coming about her, beyond the Bob Woodward book.
So do you think we will see an instant book after the election about election 2024?
Almost surely. That's kind of tradition. It could be tricky this year. We'll see how long it takes until the election is decided. As we know, with the voting process, it says one thing on election night, and then you have a lot of votes get counted afterwards. So it may be a little while before we can really say, okay, this person won. But yes, that's a tradition. You will almost surely see some kind of instant book.
Hillel Italie, we've talked about a lot of the political books coming out this fall. What else are you looking forward to seeing?
Well, as it always is in the fall in publishing, it's a great time for literary fiction. You've got some Pulitzer winners with new books: Richard Powers, Louise Erdrich, Elizabeth Strout. Probably the biggest release of the season that everyone's looking forward to is the new Sally Rooney intermezzo. And this one, any book from her has become kind of an event. She's that rare literary writer who sells just hundreds of thousands, even millions of copies. So I would say, that's as probably the big literary release of the season.
Have you seen the long list for the National Book Awards, and what do you think of some of those finalists?
A very interesting mix of books. I'm actually reading the Miranda July now, which is, very funny, very, very, very interesting book. I think a couple of books that are on that list and also on the Booker Prize list are kind of books people are really looking for as among the top of the year. There's Percival Everett's James, which really may be the kind of literary book of the year. It's his kind of retelling of the adventures of Huckleberry Finn, and he is taking the enslaved character Jim, as he was called in the book. He is now James. As you can see right away, he's doing something different here, and he's giving you James's story. And so that book has gotten an enormous amount of attention. Percival Everett, over the last few years, for a long time he was kind of under the radar, and now he's really getting a lot of attention and really kind of, really the upper echelon of writers now. And then the other one is Rachel Kushner's latest, it's called Creation Lake. You should double check that, but I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. And another one getting a lot of attention, and finalist for the Booker, as Percival Everett was, and also, long list for National Book Awards. So we're starting to get a sense of kind of, what are the books that are going to really be talked about during awards season.
Have you ever served as a judge for the National Book Awards?
No, I have not. Boy, you need a lot of time for that. Each category, you get hundreds of books, and I guess it's maybe a little easier in poetry category. At least the books are short generally, but if you're fiction or nonfiction, it's hundreds of books, and some of them several hundred pages or longer. So it's an enormous commitment. I would probably have to take a leave of absence to do that. But no, so at this point, I've not been asked.
Finally, I wanted to ask you about Donald Trump's photo book that came out in September.
Yes. Everything about him is different from other presidents. Most presidents, when they're no longer in office, kind of will put out a big kind of full traditional memoir published by one of the big New York publishers. There'll be big bidding wars for it. In his case, he is kind of doing this one through kind of a publisher he helped set up. And again, it's more, it's essentially pictures and kind of highlights, from his presidency. And so a very different kind of book from a former president. And in so many ways, not just in politics, but in publishing, he has followed a very different path.
Hillel Italie is the Associated Press's books and publishing reporter. Thanks for spending a few minutes with us to look at the fall books.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for joining us for About Books, a program and podcast produced by C-SPAN's Book TV. Book TV will continue to bring you publishing news and author programs. A reminder that you can get this podcast on the C-SPAN Now app, and you can also watch online anytime all Book TV programs at booktv.org.